Discussing about apoptosis and its pathway. What is apoptosis? Apoptosis is defined as programmed cell death. It is a unique process through which cells activate enzymes that degrade its own nucleus. Apoptosis can be Apoptosis can be triggered by physiological or pathological effects, such as the programmed destruction of cells during embryogenesis, the programmed destruction of cells due to DNA damage, chemotherapy, viral infection, etc. There are two major pathways that leads to apoptosis, which is the intrinsic pathway and the extrinsic pathway. The intrinsic pathway is a pathway that occurs through the mitochondria. In this pathway, the signaling for apoptosis is obtained within the cell. Now, when the cell's DNA is damaged, the binding of ATM to P53 leads to the activation of intrinsic pathway of apoptosis. When ATM, which is a kinase, binds to P53, it phosphorylates and activates P53. The activated P53 in turn activates two apoptotic proteins, which are BAX and BAC. Now and also inhibits BCL, which is an anti-apoptotic protein. Now the activated BAX and BAC in turn binds to the membrane of the site of the mitochondria, thereby leading to the release of cytochrome C and other effector apoptotic proteins. Now, the release of cytochrome C and other effector apoptotic proteins leads to the activation cascade of caspase 9. The activated caspase 9 in turn activates caspase 3, and caspase 3 binds with caspase 7 to activate DNase, which is an enzyme that cleaves the DNA of the cell into fragments, thereby leading to phagocytosis and cell death. The extrinsic pathway, it's a pathway that is activated by the signaling of death receptors. When death ligands such as tumor necrosis factor binds to the appropriate receptor, it leads to a conformational change in the receptors, thereby leading to a release. The binding of this ligand to its receptor leads to a conformational change in the receptor, which leads to the release of death of apoptotic proteins housed in the death domain of the receptors. There are about 80 amino acids that plays a role in apoptosis, and these amino acids are housed in the death domain of the receptors. When those amino acids are released, that leads to the activation cascade of caspase 8. Activated caspase 8 binds to the membrane of the mitochondria and brings about the release of cytochrome C from the mitochondria. Now, the released cytochrome C leads to the activation cascade of caspase 9. Now, caspase 9 in turn activates other effector caspases such as caspase 3 and caspase 7. And caspase 3 and caspase 7 binds together to activate DNase, which is an enzyme that cleaves the DNA of the mitochondria into fragments, the DNA of the cell into fragments. And the DNA goes about cleaving the DNA of the cell into fragments, thereby leading to phagocytosis and cell death. Thank you.